hate that little voice. Okay. All right, so here we go. Logic, the rules for correct thinking. And from the get-go, some of you are like, wait, what? There's rules for correct thinking? Isn't it just however you think is good? Because all of your brains are unique and they're all special and they're all good. A's for everybody. We already know that that's not okay because that's relativism, and relativism is bad. Relativism is bad, yeah. Yeah, there are rules for correct thinking. You realize this. Let's just let this sink in for a second. There's better and worse ways about thinking about things. I think probably when you put it that way, you intuitively know this, right? Like, because you know what it was like, hopefully that's not right now, when you're not thinking well. You know what it's like to look back on something and go, what was I thinking? Right? You know what it's like to do something and you're like, that does not match with the way the world is. Like, this is not going to fly, right? You know what that's like. You also know when things are clicking and you're like, I'm on it, right? And fuego. Okay? So you kind of know this a little bit by intuition. But so what we're about to do, like we do a lot in philosophy, is take things that you kind of intuitively know and pull them to the front of your brain and in front of your eyes where we can see it and talk about it and name it. Okay? So a lot of the things we're going to talk about, especially in this section, you're going to go, yeah, duh. Okay, but I'm going to tell you why it's so intuitive, why it's so just a part of the way things are. Okay, it's pretty cool. So there are rules for correct thinking. So let me tell you what logic is. Okay, this is going to be a very, very skim the surface. You can spend a whole semester just on logic, and it gets pretty mathematical in a hurry. But logic, generally speaking, is the rules of correct reasoning or valid inference. Okay. Valid inference and correct reasoning, you can use those interchangeably. Okay? What valid inference and correct reasoning really mean is that it means that you're good at realizing when one thing implies another and when it doesn't. Okay? And it also means you're good at avoiding fallacies, which you read about in Love is a Fallacy. Okay? So let's talk about inference for a second. Or implication. Do you know what that means? Explain to me what that means. Inference, when you infer something, do you know what that means?
Suggesting it.
Okay, good, without actually saying it, right? If you imply something, are you like talking about it or not? Yeah, right? There's implicit and explicit. Right? I mean, think about just the way the words sound, right? Implicit, okay, sounds internal. Explicit sounds external, right? When you read or when you listen to music that has a little box on it that says explicit, okay, means it has language in it. Why? Because they're just saying it and they're warning you that word / phrases / whatever, it's all in there and you're going to hear it. It's not implied, it's explicit, okay? It's out there, all right? So implicit and inference means it's not really being said, but you're coming to that conclusion based on all sorts of other things. How many of you have done this with people? We've talked about this in this class before, I think. Right? You've done it with people where you found out you got a weird vibe from somebody. They just rubbed you the wrong way and you just don't like them. And so you kind of treat them a little bit like crap, not overtly so that you're like a terrible person, right? But it's more like you just kind of give them the cold shoulder or you kind of just ignore their jokes sometimes or whatever, okay? You know this. You've done this because you're terrible people like me, and I've done it too. Then, have you ever had this happen where then you find out something about them that explains why they are the way that they are, and then you feel really bad? Okay? So some of you are like, nope, I haven't found that out. They're just terrible and I hate them. But some of you, like for me, I found this out about somebody, and it really, and then what do you do when you find that out, right? You can't all of a sudden start being nice to them because that's weird, right? It's a bad situation. The whole scene is bad. So like I found out one time, this person just really got on my nerves. It was a student of mine. This was semesters and semesters ago. None of y'all were here, okay? So at least I don't think you were. So this student of mine was in a comp class. And she sat like decently near the front, and she was always like at first she looked like she was really ready to learn. Okay, she was like this all the time, right? Sitting at the desk and like looking at, no, semesters and semesters ago. So she's like doing this, right? She's like, writing stuff down, and she's always like this. And she comes in, and it's like one of those students, and you know these people in class, but she comes in and she's got like 3 bags, and they're all real big, and it's like a production every time they come in and sit down and like get settled and drag their notebook out, right? It's like a big deal, okay? They need 10 extra minutes to get settled in class. And then she's like making noise all the time, and like, she's not a quiet person. Again, nothing wrong with that, right? She's not being disrespectful or anything, but she's just one of those people that got on my nerves. And she got on my nerves as a teacher. And the way that she asked questions and the way that she just butted in and the way that it just crossed the line from eager student to really annoying. Okay, I'm just letting you know, us as teachers have those people in our lives, okay? None of you are like that here, maybe. Just kidding. None of you are like that in this class. So anyway, I got really irritated, and then she turned in an assignment that made 0 sense. Take that back. It made 50% sense because she completed half of it, and the other half she was like, well, let me tell you what she did. Okay, this is going to be a good example for you. So the assignment was to write 2 paragraphs about the same thing, but one paragraph had to have like a happy vibe, and the other paragraph had to have a sad vibe. So you change the vibe by changing the details. Same scenario in the paragraph, right? Different details. Does that make sense? It was an exercise to get them to realize the power of their descriptive details, okay? So she wrote the first paragraph. They were supposed to be about the same thing, okay? She wrote the first paragraph, and she turned in the second paragraph, and the first paragraph was about going to her childhood home, okay? She turned in the second paragraph with it, and then in the second paragraph, she's driving. She starts out driving down this long road that's lined with trees and stuff like that, just like the first one starts. But in the second paragraph, she kind of wanders off onto the road and gets stuck in the mud and can't get out, like her car can't get out. And her paragraph ends. And I was like, this is supposed to be the same thing. Like, you're supposed to write about, I understand you got, like, you're writing about your car getting stuck, but like, you're supposed to get to the house and describe the house and that kind of thing. And 1,000% she looked at me and said, but I couldn't get to the house. My car got stuck. And I was like, that's what I wanted to do real bad, right? But she was deadpan serious. Totally serious. She's like, I couldn't finish the assignment because my car got stuck. And I'm like, you wrote yourself into the ditch. You realize this. Like, you can write yourself out. Just keep writing. Like, just make up something, right? Get out of the ditch. And then magically a unicorn came out and pulled my car. I don't care, right? But like, you're supposed to, but she was like, that's how she thought. Like, I can't do it. So anyway, I couldn't get through to her. I couldn't, like, this didn't, stuff like this kept happening. I find out in a moment of honest conversation in the class, like we're talking about things that are personal to us, and she pipes up, she's strangely quiet that day, and she pipes up and starts talking about how she was in a car wreck a few years before this and like suffered really traumatic brain injury and had to learn how to talk, had to learn how to walk, and here she is all the way through years later in a college class. And then I felt like a terrible person. Right? Because she's like, I have trouble with the way that I think sometimes, like I get stuck on stuff, but I like try to push through. It was like one of these things where she's being really honest, and I was like, I'm the worst teacher on the face of the planet ever, right? Because I was so frustrated with her when I realized, this is the way she is because of things that have happened in the past that are out of her control, right? Still feel bad when I tell that because she's a really sweet person, but I haven't seen her in a while. I hope she's okay. So, anyway, what I'm taking from her behavior, what I'm taking from her, what she's saying, like all of the things that I'm drawing, and I'm drawing conclusions all the time. We all do. We draw conclusions all the time about the people around us, okay? Even as teachers, even while I'm lecturing, I'm gathering information, right? Are they asleep? Are they, totally not getting this? That kind of stuff. So I'm gathering information, and when we gather information, we base conclusions off of that. Well, I gathered the information, and all the information was correct. I just came to the wrong conclusion. Okay, I said this plus this plus this plus this equals a really annoying person. When what it should have happened was this plus this plus this plus this, same stuff, right? equals a person who's struggling to heal from a traumatic brain injury. Like, come on, teacher of the year, figure out a better way to teach to the student who's struggling and trying to make it, right? That should have been my conclusion. Okay? So do you see how, like, you can infer something totally different from the same set of data? Does that make sense to you? That's inference. Because nowhere in there did she say, or have a sign on or a t-shirt, right, that says I'm recovering from a traumatic brain injury. It wasn't explicit until later, after I'd already drawn my conclusions, right? It wasn't explicit, it's implicit, okay? And I implied the wrong thing. Make sense? Okay? Shorter version would be implying that somebody's single when they're not. Bad news, right? You put this, and this together, implies that they're single. Whoops. Okay, could get you in a lot of trouble. Okay, so implication is never explicit. It's always implicit. Okay. When you imply things, you put things together, and the way that you add stuff together and collect your data, if you can avoid fallacies, the chances of you arriving at the right conclusion are better. Okay, so that's where fallacies come in. All right, good? Okay, so the relationship between reason and logic is a very tight one. Okay, when we say, we've talked about this before in this class, so we'll be brief. When we say be reasonable, what we're saying is use the rules to gather your data and infer the right thing so that you come to the correct conclusion. That's what we mean. Now, since we already know what truth is, or at least we have a pretty good idea that truth is what matches reality, what we're asking people to do when we say, oh, come on, be reasonable, we're asking them to see the facts for what they are, to see reality for what they are, and then to add up the facts in such a way as so that they come to the proper conclusion. Okay? Does that make sense? So there's like factors at play here. There's the way you see the world, okay, and you can see it in a screwed up way. You can view it through a lens that's not right. Then there's the data that you collect, right? Like the data I was collecting about my student. Okay, she takes forever to get in class, she just does this, she can't think through it, or she can't write herself out of the ditch in a paragraph, right? Like putting all this stuff together, she's really annoying and not suited for college. Okay? I'm telling you, I'm a terrible person. Okay? So that you can gather the data and then adding it up the data. So we see the world, we gather the data, we add up the data in the correct way. All those are factors in coming to the correct conclusion. And all those are places where you could potentially go wrong and then come up to the wrong, have the wrong conclusion. Okay? Logic and basketball. So when I moved to Oklahoma, I moved down here and like a week later got married. So I'd never really been to Oklahoma until I started dating Patrick, my husband. So first time I went to Oklahoma, I moved to Tulsa. Not recommended. It's like boring in Tulsa. I mean, I love the town, right? But I was like, yeah, flat and dusty. It's what I about thought it would be, Then I come down here and I'm like, hey, this is where I live. So, so when I came down here, I also had to learn about basketball. And I'm like 6 foot tall. Everybody thinks I played basketball in high school. I did not. I swam competitively in high school, and I know about 5 things about basketball. Before I moved here, I knew 0 things. I like -2 things. Okay. So they both have rules, do they not? Now the rules change sometimes, okay? But they both have rules. So if we look and if you're like just shooting around, right? Can you guys use the gym now? Or whatever? Okay. Like shooting around or, whatever, just doing whatever. Are you really playing, when we say let's go play basketball, but are you really playing basketball?
No.
Not really. You're probably calling your own fouls or not, or just fouling the crap out of everybody else and not caring or whatever. Like, right, it's not really the game. It's a close representation of it. But it's not really the game. You're still putting the ball through the goal, but that's about it, okay? There are rules. So if you're really going to play basketball, then you've got to follow the rules. Okay, logic is the same way. If you're really going to think correctly, you got to follow the rules. You can get real close, right? But it's still not be basketball, okay? You can get real close. But listen, 1 extra person out on the floor, right? It's close to 5. It's just 6. But that's not basketball, because that's not how we play. We don't play 5-on-6. Those aren't the rules. Wish we could, but no. Okay? So understand that there are rules that are objective and they're out there. Does that make sense? Yeah. Here's an interesting quote. You don't have to write this down or anything, but let's think about this. An argument, remember, like a set of premises and a conclusion, not a fight. Okay? An argument will only be as good as the statements of which it is composed. It's kind of like It's only as strong as your weakest link. Okay? If all your statements in your argument are good, your argument's going to be good. But those statements in turn will only be as good as the terms of which they are composed. So you got to look and see how your statements are composed too. Logic is talking about all of that. It's talking about the terms, and it's talking about how the statements are arranged with each other. Okay? Okay. Roles of logic. This is what logic can do for us. So we know a little bit about what it is. This is what it can do. It can demonstrate error. It can demonstrate error. Okay? In other words, we know this already, a logically contradictory statement or event or thing cannot be true. Something that's logically contradictory can't be true. So if we're following the rules of logic and then it conflicts, right? It disobeys one of the rules of logic, then it's an error. So logic as a system can show us when something is erroneous, something is in error, it's wrong. Okay? Because there are these rules, when the rules are broken, we understand that it's wrong, that it's in error. Okay? For example, a square circle, a married bachelor. What I've said to you before, all English sentences are less than 5 words. Okay? When they contradict, we see that can't happen. It's not good. Doesn't work. Okay? It defies each of these things are doing is defying certain laws of logic. There are 3 of them. We're going to go over them here in a second. Okay? So the second thing that the second role that logic plays is that it does demonstrate error, but it can't prove truth. So it can show us where we're wrong, but it can't guarantee that it's true. So just so that you know, right? Even if something follows all the rules of logic, that doesn't mean 100% that it's right. It just means that it's reasonable. But as we know, your reasons could be crap, right? So just because the logic will get you there, it'll start you on the right road, but it doesn't guarantee the truth. Okay? So a statement can be logically possible and still be false. Okay? The statement, I have a red cube in my pocket. That's reasonable, right? That's not like saying all English sentences are less than 5 words, right? That's possible. I have a red cube in my pocket. Okay, that's a logically sound sentence. Makes sense, makes English sense, right? Possible. It's not like saying I have a planet in my pocket, okay? Right, I have a red cube in my pocket. But the fact is I don't. In reality, I do not. So it doesn't guarantee truth. It doesn't guarantee that that statement matches reality. Does that make sense? But it gets us further down the road than, saying that my husband is a married bachelor. Okay, so that's the role of logic, these 2 things. When we're preparing our mind for logic, we have 3 things we need to keep track of, okay? First of all, we need to pay attention. I think I've talked about this in this class before, paying attention. Have we talked about how attention costs you something? Maybe? No? Okay. When you're preparing your mind for logic, it involves you paying attention, okay? We've talked about focus in this class. We talked about waking up your brain and that kind of stuff. But I have recognized that there are umpteen different things vying for your attention. And I also recognize that you guys, more than any other generation, are good at carrying those things in your brain all at the same time. I recognize that's how you're raised, that's the culture you live in, and that's cool, and I think that's awesome. However, I will also say that even if you can carry all of them, you cannot focus on all of them at the same time. Okay? So you can carry them, but you can only focus on 1, maybe 2 things at a time, but I'm still hardcore going to say 1. Really focus. Okay? That's called paying attention. Well, when you do that, other things have to sacrifice. Okay? So that's what you're paying. In order to focus on something, it costs you something. It costs your attention, it costs your mental effort, sometimes it costs your physical effort, and it costs your time, okay? And it costs your attention from other things. So you have to take away attention from other things in order to pay attention to this thing. Does that make sense? That's why it's called paying attention, because it costs you something. It really does. So don't do it, okay? This is not a legit excuse to skip class because you can fake it to me. But don't do it until you're ready to pay it. There is no credit card for this scenario. You can't just put it on a card, okay? Don't do it until you're ready to pay attention, until you're ready to pay what it costs. Recognize that it costs something and be ready for it, okay? Again, this doesn't make it bad. It just makes it important and costly. It's like buying a new car, right? That's a hefty burden. Kind of necessary. Got to give up other stuff in order to do it. Okay, same. You guys are familiar with this concept. Okay. Secondly, understand what facts we're dealing with. Okay, just generally speaking, understand what facts you're dealing with. Keep in your mind the difference between objective and subjective. Okay, keep in your mind the difference between objective and subjective. Remember that when we're establishing a fact, when we want to argue that something is a fact, then there has to be a corresponding external reality. Okay, it has to match reality. If we're going to say that something's true, it is factual, it has to match reality. Okay, and also use precise language. Okay, link your facts to your words. Search, the right word is out there. You got to search for it though. Okay, value your own thoughts enough to find the word that matches your thoughts and that best expresses it, so that other people can understand what that thought is. Okay? Use precise language. A bad idea is going to be one that doesn't match reality. So to the extent that you can use your language to link your ideas to the facts, your ideas are going to be a good idea. Does that make sense? Okay? And that communication words is how we communicate our ideas. So a good idea is going to be one that's communicated well and matches with reality. Okay, and then finally, avoid vague and evasive language. Okay? Vague language is language where you're like, tell me what, I don't know what that means. Okay? Evasive is like, you're trying to get out of saying something. You don't really want to say it. You're just trying to skirt around the issue. Okay? Avoid those. We're talking about logic. Don't be confrontational, but say what you mean. Mean what you say. Okay. Let's talk about the 3 laws of logic. This one will be easy because you already know it. You already know it. 3 laws of logic. The first one is called the law of non-contradiction. Okay? The law of non-contradiction. It says A, substitute anything you want for A. Okay, this is just how logic works. A cannot equal A and non-A at the same time and in the same sense. A, substitute anything you want for A, cannot equal non-A at the same time and in the same sense. Can you think of an exception to this? I always have students at this point go, wait a second, what about, and they try stuff on for size. Justice? Need to stand up or something like that? What do you think? A cannot equal non-A. Is there anything in the world that we can think of that would get around this law? Does everything match this law?
Relativism?
What about the absolute value, like in the math term?
Okay, what do you mean? Keep going.
Usually when you do like a linear equation, and
Okay.
it includes absolute value, the number usually will equal a positive and a negative.
Okay.
You have to try to find a number that will make those 2 match.
Okay, but that number still is one number.
Yeah, it's still just one number.
Yeah. And an absolute value is still a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can't be absolute value and not absolute value at the same time. Right.
I just try to find it.
No, you're good. You're good.
That's
That's
the first thing that made me.
That's a good attempt. Okay, some examples, easy examples. Today is Wednesday and it is not Wednesday, right? Can't happen. Okay, life originated from non-life and was created by a supernatural being. That can't make sense. It doesn't make sense, right? It can't be both. It could be neither somehow. Okay, but it can't be both. Tracking, this is what we talked about in relativism. This is why relativism is bad, because it says, or tries to say, right, Jesse, that both of these can be true at the same time in the same sense, when we see that that can't happen in the real world. Okay? Okay. Good. You ready for the second law? Okay, the law of the excluded middle. This is the one we talked about on day 1. On day 1 in this class when we played Would You Rather. This is what we talked about. Okay, the law of the excluded middle. A, again, substitute anything for A. A is either A or non-A. Okay, in the first law, we realized that it can't be both at the same time And so now we're basically backing that up by saying it is one or the other. Okay? It's one or the other. Can't be both at the same time. It's one or the other. And if it's the other, it's not the one. Okay, that's the law of non-contradiction. So there's no middle. There's no like transition period where it's both A and non-A. Okay? There's no gray area here. The middle is excluded. Okay? It's taken out. Excluded middle. There is no middle. There's only two sides. Okay? Does that make sense? I realize that can seem like very black and white because there's no gray, but that's kind of the way it is when we talk about logic, okay? And I'm not saying like situations and I'm also not saying that you will always know what A and non-A is, but don't confuse not knowing with not existing, okay? Just because you don't know something doesn't mean that it's there or not there. It just means you don't know it, and that's okay. You can progress towards or away from that. That's cool, right? But just because you don't know something, don't automatically create a gray area and say, well, it's a gray area. Okay? That just makes you feel better, but it doesn't do anything to the real world. Okay? It either is or it isn't. It's just the fact is you don't know. So instead of saying I don't know, we say it's a gray area, and that kind of helps us save face a little bit. But we're not really creating anything, you realize. Okay? It's just a semantic game. It's a word game. Okay? Okay, so something either is or it is not. The statement is either true or false. There is no middle ground. We might not know if it's true or false, but there's no middle ground. Okay? All right, third law. The law of identity. The law of identity. This law says A is A. It is what it is. Now, all of these laws, you see them kind of overlapping. Like when you go to explain one law, you end up saying another law in your explanation, right? They're all very interconnected, but we need all of these concepts in order to understand the way the world is. So, a thing, a person, event, proposition, it is what it is. Okay, a thing is identical to itself and different from all other things. It is what it is, which makes it itself and makes it different from all other things. Okay? So usually, on my coffee cup in here. Usually I'm doing this lecture, I'm carrying a coffee cup, but, right? I mean, how many of these phones were produced?
Billions.
A lot, right? But this one is this one, and it's not another one. It has nothing to do with the fact that I own it. It has nothing to do with the fact that it's got a case on it. It has nothing to do with any of that, right? This one is this one and not another one. Okay? Look. You are you and not somebody else. This is part of what gives you ownership of your person, what gives you autonomy. You are you and not somebody else. Now, yes, you're you because you're special and because you have all sorts of gifts and abilities and you're unique and all that cheesy stuff. But do you realize just the fact that you are another human? You are this human and not another human. Okay? So because of that, that should kind of allow you to kind of do this to your mental life, right? You are you and not somebody else. You have autonomy over your own being. You are this human and not any of those other humans. Okay? Interesting. Okay. How you feeling?
Tired.
Tired? Good. I know Justice is asleep here.
$11:35.
This is what we're doing next. You want to stop?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, let's stop.
Okay.
Let's stop.